pins and pin it to the wall. It doesn't need bulky reassurances. Nothing's going to happen to it.
Right.
And that's the entire downstairs installation at the Grace Museum this fall, including the 36-foot long yupo one.
Right.
Was all yupo pinned to the wall.
Sure.
So they were in the wall, not sticking out.
Sure. So you before our conversation, you showed me a scaled reproduction of that giant piece.
Yeah, Albers House.
And so that is five. It was installed as 5 feet by 36 feet.
Right. It's almost 37, as it turns out.
Wow.
But the little postcard reproduction is 5 inches by 36 inches.
Mm-hmm. And so there are a number of things going on in that piece, and I think sometimes it's hard to get an impression as to how a work. Sometimes a work is different when you see it on the page versus seeing it in person. And
fortunately, in the Grace Museum website, you can see it in the back of the room. They have a wall long enough for it,
right.
So you can see it with human size.
Right. And so, but sometimes when you're standing there and a work that size envelops you.
I hope so.
You have it's a different experience. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason we still have museums and galleries to go to
and bank lobbies.
Right. And so, but this, I'm just trying to think that is almost the size of some of those water lilies we see at Lingerie.
Yes, I'm not too sure what size they are, but in every other museum except the Grace that this has been in, the end has to go around the corner.
Oh my gosh!
And it can, because the last 11 feet is a separate piece of yupo, so that it has a break, so that it can turn a corner if it has to.
So this is an unbroken sheet of yupo?
Up until the last 11 feet.
So you're able to buy yupo on a roll.
That's right. That's a whole roll of yupo plus 11 feet of the next roll. And it was painted in my studio all along the long wall and around the corner, so that it took up almost 2 walls of the studio to paint it.
Wow. And so tell me about the day that you sat down and said, you know what, I think I want to buy 36 feet of yupo and surround my studio and create, my magnum opus. Simply
because I hadn't done it before. I said, yupo, it comes long. What if we used it all? What space idea? I wouldn't call it a story, but it is about Albers and his adventures in New Mexico. However, it's thoughts on his adventures.
Sure.
So what could we tell? What materials could we use that would be fun to use on that? Like powdered graphite in the large dark marks, and how much of the ideas of Albers in the 1940s could be fit onto that. So I just started in various places on the wall and then made them all fit together somehow. It's like chapters.
Sure. I think great art leaves lots of room for us, the viewer, to fill in blanks however we wish. It makes things feel more personal.
It could be not about Albers.
Right.
It could be your story.
And I, when I look at it, it does appear that there's this we here in our culture, we like to read left to right, and there does seem to be a stage in this piece where there's a kind of a transformative quality from something, from one sort of material and subject through almost a portal to something that feels very different. And I assume that was intentional, but it could just be me.
The whole thing reads from left to right.
Sure.
In a way, it was painted from left to right. It was. There are places where I get ahead of myself and then go backwards, but yes, it's a left to right.
Right.
It's like a scroll.
Sure. And all the way over here. I mean, and again, the artist's intent, versus my, to me, these almost speak like blood cells when we get all the way over here. And so, and that's always the interesting thing when you make a work that's, beyond the quantifiable, the perceptions that people bring in, but it's
also a problem of how to organize a rectangle. How do you begin it? How do you make it start, and how do you make it end?
Right.
And what happens in the middle? And how do you make something that doesn't stop the whole thing from moving?
Right.
It's one of those compositional problems.
Sure. Well,
too.
You know what? I think that just tells me that you think like a writer. Because
that's nice.
Because isn't that how someone would describe a piece of prose? A good book, a play. It's how do you start it? How do you end it? How do you keep it from stalling in between? Right. And so you learned something from Mr. McNulty, was it?
Oh yes, I learned everything from Mr. McNulty. If he only knew.
Right. Wonderful. And so, where can people, do you have any shows going on right now?
Right now, no, but the wonderful thing about having a great dealer is that they have it all and they're delighted to pull it out for you.
And that is Valley House.
Valley House on Spring Valley Road.
The Vogels. I remember when I was an undergrad, I remember Barnaby would take us on little field trips. And I remember him taking us to a show at Valley House. I remember that being my first time there. It was 30 plus years ago. And it's one of those places where, you could be driving down, you could pass right by.
Oh, you would never know.
And you would never know. But you pull in and it's this, beautiful little oasis with this amazing work. And
it's the oldest still working gallery in Dallas from the 50s.
Wow.
Second generation dealers, that happens in Paris all the time,
right.
But not in Dallas very often.
Right. And so, and just longevity and gallerists / dealers, those terms don't often go hand in hand because, well, in New York, it's a matter of real estate and and how the cost of your space winds up. If gentrification sets in, next thing you know, your space is not affordable anymore, and the economics of having a gallery are
in
New
York and in Dallas the same. You don't last forever if you're crooked. There are plenty of crooked people who are in business as dealers, but longevity is a matter of reputation in this business, and reputations are not built by misbehavior.
Right.
So that a long-lasting gallery with a good reputation is rare and wonderful.
Sure. Yeah, I think I even read that. Is it Cheryl?
Yes.
It was actually a student of yours
Yes.
at one point.
It's so wonderful to have a student who turns out to be a great dealer.
Right. That's wonderful. And so, like you said, they have such an amazing reputation. And so we can always check out your work at their site. Do you have a website that
I
folks
do,
can-
maryvernon.com.
Okay.
Things are always put up people complain to me, but in the fall of every year I put up the results. I'm going to move to a system pretty soon in which there's much more immediate posting, in which it's not year by year, but maybe week by week.
Sure.
More exciting, I think. But I'd have to do it myself that way.
Right.
Now I have time. I will.
No, I understand.
But I believe in the fall, in September, there will be a show of mine and Deborah Hunter's at the Pollock Gallery at SMU.
Nice.
It's a little space. It'll be a little show. But it will be fun to have that one.
Right. So a couple other questions I forgot I wanted to ask you. One is, what does it feel like to have an art prize named after you?
It feels better than almost anything except teaching class in terms of education.
Sure.
It is such an honor. Okay. The dean called me once on the phone one afternoon and said, there's somebody who wants to organize a big donation thing in your honor. What kind of thing should they do? Meaning, giving to students, what is this going to be? A scholarship, first-year students? I said painting. It's going to be to support and praise the idea of students making paintings.
That's wonderful. And
so this unbelievable committee of, let's call them energetic power women, made the whole thing happen. And they set a goal of at least $100,000 so that it would have its own spin-off of money, investment money.
Sustainability.
And it's now at 150.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Which is just success beyond success.
So the next thing you know,
they ought to work on anything.
So the next thing we know in 20 years, the Mary Vernon Prize is going to be have grown to something like the Turner Prize in the UK.
Oh, I think not. I think it'll, and if it did, think of the machinations there would be to not have students win it. Right. And to not have, it's not even for a senior, it's for the best body of work by an undergraduate.
Interesting.
If the faculty remembers the rules.
Right.
So we don't want it to get too big so that it outgrows the people it was intended for.
And so that the prize would hopefully fund experimentation with materials that they wouldn't otherwise be able to afford, I gather.
Yes, or any materials, or finding a studio, or fixing their car, or whatever you need to do to live.
Sure. Great. And the last question I have is, I had heard that you have a story about a run-in with Georgia O'Keeffe.
That's even before I painted that painting I told you about.
Right.
I have actually met Georgia O'Keeffe 2 times in my life, and the second time was completely terrifying and normal. Because of the first story, I hoped she didn't remember me. When I was I don't know if I was 5 or 6 or something like that, maybe even 4. I was in a museum where there was some sort of party going on, I could tell that. I was in a room with my mother, and by chance, we seemed to be entirely alone in the room. Mm-hmm. And I said to my mother, this is a horrible painting. I said, it's just so bad. I don't ever want to see a painting like this. And I suppose what I was talking about was that it was sort of smooth. It was too smooth, maybe a little like surrealist smooth, maybe rubbery. There was something about it I didn't like. I have no idea what painting it was. But from the back of the room,